Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the internet, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. Got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about today. We're looking at the new philosophy the MCU seems to have towards the villains they have. Expendables 4 gets a green light with Sylvester Stallone signing back up. It looks like Solo could be poised to break the Memorial Day weekend record, but we get things started right off the top with this. Speaking of Solo, one of the dudes, and a lot of people have had a chance to see the movie now, but one of the guys who apparently has had the chance to see the movie not once but twice now is the real Han Solo himself, Harrison Ford. Now, Harrison Ford has gone and seen the movie a couple times, and he recently spoke with his longtime friend and director, of course, Ron Howard, talking about Harrison Ford's thoughts about Solo. And this is Ron Howard reporting his conversation with Harrison Ford, because apparently Harrison Ford just freaking loved the film. There are reports going on about how much he gushed over it, but Ron Howard put it like this: I had never heard Harrison effuse about anything, and he was raving about it. He said, Alden nailed it. He made it his own. I had never heard Harrison effuse about anything, and he was raving about it. He said, Alden nailed it. He made it his. Now, this is, of course, very good and very strong endorsement coming from the dude who really is Han Solo, which is, of course, Harrison Ford. So that's a ringing great endorsement. It sounds like maybe he liked the movie a little bit better than I did. Like, you saw my review. I thought it was a very fun action-adventure film. Not something that's going to be in the top 10 films of the year discussion by any stretch of the imagination, and it has some clunkiness along the way, but a fun adventure film. But one of the things that I quite enjoyed about it was the fact that Alden Ehrenreich really did come in, and he really did nail a younger version of Han Solo. And he kind of did make it his own. That's one of the things I said myself. But I think there's going to be a lot of people who will appreciate that Harrison Ford comes out and says something like this. Now, however, just because Harrison Ford liked it doesn't mean you're going to like it, or doesn't mean anybody else will like it, or anything like that. It's a great endorsement. Absolutely it is. Wonderful endorsement. But it's just an endorsement for one person who has one particular opinion about a movie. So let's not get too carried away about it, but certainly in the grand scheme of things, when you've got the original Han Solo saying, hey, the new guy doing Han Solo nailed it, that's a good thing, and that should be taken as a positive. So let's keep it in context and not go overboard on just how big the significance of it is. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get on to today's movie news feed. First up, it was recently announced that Sylvester Stallone would be returning to the Rambo franchise with a Rambo 5 going into production later this year. Now it looks like he's coming back for another one of his high-profile franchises, as it has just been announced that The Expendables 4 will go into production this year, possibly at the end of the summer, with an early 2019 release date being looked at. The box office results for the franchise has been up and down, with the highest grossing film being Expendables 2, which made nearly $315 million worldwide, but the third installment took a significant dive, making just $214 million and just $39 million domestically. Jason Statham and Dolph Lundgren are expected at this point to return, but Arnold Schwarzenegger could be a problem, as the next Terminator film is expected to be shooting at the same time as Expendables 4. The Expendables is one of those franchises that, hey, you know what? This was a good idea, getting all these action heroes together for one big bombastic movie, but it's also an idea they probably should have let die before number 3, and now they're going into number 4. Now, the biggest question mark for me is, as we just mentioned, the third film took a big nosedive in its overall box office, only made $214 million worldwide. The bigger concerning number, though, was that $39 million, only taking $39 million at the domestic box office. That means, even though it only made $214, the majority of that money just came from overseas, just kind of feeding off the nostalgia factor of these big former action heroes. Can they sustain that? Can they suspect that the trajectory of this with the box office returns is going to do anything different this time around? Like, I know after number 3, Sylvester Stallone was on record saying things like, oh, it was because it wasn't rated R because of this, or it could just be that people just got tired of the franchise. Now look, it's an Expendables movie. They're going to get big names. Maybe they'll get Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or some other big action icons in this one too that'll make it worth watching. But overall, I just don't see how this makes business sense. I just don't see an awful lot of people rushing out to see it. But as in everything else, let's see what they have in mind and maybe they'll come up with something special. Next up, the upcoming Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom doesn't open here in North America until June 22nd, but the film has already got a few early screenings in Madrid, Spain the other day, and the fan reactions coming out were simply off the scales. Now keep in mind, these are general movie-going audience reactions, but they're still quite positive. A reviewer named Jack Anthony Ewins writes, "I laughed, I cried, I found myself genuinely scared. All that even though it was in Spanish. In my opinion, if that's not the definition of perfect visual storytelling, I don't know what it is. Hashtag Fallen Kingdom, congrats at Film Bayona." Another review came from Josep Para Jorba, who wrote, "Hours later, after seeing Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom twice in one day, and still being under embargo, even if I don't write about movies anymore, but I saw it twice in 12 hours, ahem, ahem, I can say the 10-minute standing ovation at the end was beyond well-deserved." Look, I've been saying for a while now that the marketing campaign for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom has been underwhelming to say the least. I mean, really, if anything, the trailers I've seen for this movie have actually lessened my anticipation. I just don't think they've done a good job with the trailers at all. However, I wasn't super stoked for the first Jurassic World either, and that thing came out and broke the opening weekend box office record at the time and blew a lot of audiences away. So the marketing campaign has not been good. But look, we've seen a lot of examples over the years of movies with bad trailers that ended up being really good movies. And why not? This is J.A. Bayona directing this thing. This guy is a celebrated director for good reason. Like, this guy knows how to direct really good narrative, really good story, and then you put him on board with the team that's doing Jurassic World, and maybe something really spectacular can come out. Now, look, I already mentioned that this isn't a bunch of film critics. This is just average film-going audiences, so take that with a grain of salt. But even still, even if it's just an average film-going audience going in and seeing these screenings, you would much rather hear positive stuff being buzzed about than negative stuff. So, is this movie going to be all that? Is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom going to be a spectacular movie? Who knows? The jury's still out on that. But again, I'd rather hear them saying positive things coming out of it than negative things, so let's chalk this up as a positive sign. Next up, Lionsgate has tapped John Wick director Chad Staheliski to helm the movie version of the dystopian sci-fi comic Analog. According to reports, the story of Analog is set in 2024 when the internet is used only for pornography after the world is mass doxed, an event that has removed secrecy from the internet and given rise to armed couriers or paper jockeys who will transport sensitive information around the globe or die trying as they fight off fascists, criminals, and spies. At the moment, no castings have been announced. Staheliski is also said to be preparing for his reboot of The Highlander, but no new news, including any casting, has been announced for that project in a while, and its future is currently a little bit in doubt. Gotta admit, I am unfamiliar with this comic book Analog, but this synopsis, this outline, this plot idea sounds great. Where all anonymity, all secrecy on the internet is gone, basically leaving the internet only good for pornography and looking up probably Wikipedia articles at the same time. And the fact that if you want to get sensitive, secret information to somebody, you have to use physical couriers. This sounds like a really cool idea. It's got me instantly interested in this. Now, I have been waiting and waiting and waiting for Staheliski to get this Highlander movie going. The original The Highlander with Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery is one of my top 10 all-time favorite films. It's the one film on my top 10 list that people go, really? When I mentioned that one's on my list, but I love that original. I've liked and disliked a number of the other Highlander things we've gotten over the years. But with Staheliski directing, I've been legitimately interested in what he was going to do with it. Unfortunately, we keep hearing a whole bunch of nothing, and now it sounds like he's moving on to another project altogether, which kind of makes me wonder if this Highlander thing's even working. But put the Highlander thing aside for a second. This Analog project sounds really interesting. They got a great director on board. It sounds like a really good fit for his style, so I'm excited for this thing. Next up, with the smash success of Deadpool 2, as well as multiple other projects in development, it seems like Ryan Reynolds is only getting busier, and it is now being reported that Reynolds will star in the upcoming Netflix original film, Underground 6, to be directed by Transformers helmer Michael Bay on a script written by Deadpool and Deadpool 2 screenwriters Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese. The project is being called an action thriller and will boast the biggest budget for a Netflix film so far, said to be in the $150 million budget range. As for Michael Bay, he's coming off a major success of his own as he is the producer of probably the best film of 2018 so far, A Quiet Place. Now, maybe I'm just being a little pessimistic, but I think probably my suspicion right now is that the only reason Ryan Reynolds is getting involved with this is probably as a favor to his Deadpool screenwriters. Because apparently they just wrote this script, Netflix has picked it up, and I'm just guessing, I can't back this up with anything, I'm only speculating, that they probably made the promise, we can get Ryan Reynolds on board. Now, the idea that Michael Bay himself is going to be directing it, look, say what we will about a bunch of his movies. Michael Bay makes the hits. Michael Bay makes hits. He makes movies that make money. It's an interesting pairing seeing him going and doing a Netflix film and them budgeting $150 million for something like this. Okay, I'll admit it. You got my attention. That's fairly interesting. However, coming off of another high-profile, fairly big-budget Netflix original film that got lots of attention in Bright with Will Smith, that movie, I thought, was really quite bad, and I didn't really like it all that much. Quite frankly, a lot of Netflix original movies don't end up being all that good. So I'm going to reserve myself right now before I get too excited for it because there's a lot of strikes against it. But the writers from Deadpool 1 and 2, you've got Ryan Reynolds getting on board with it. So, you know what? Color me curious. Let's keep our eyes on this and see how it develops. And finally, it's going to be an absolutely crazy weekend at the box office as Avengers Infinity War and Deadpool 2 will both be in theaters and now are being joined by another big film, Star Wars Solo. According to industry tracking, Solo, despite all the behind-the-scenes drama, is poised to break the Pirates of the Caribbean World's End Memorial Holiday Weekend box office record, which currently sits at $139.8 million. How much it'll break the record by is still up in the air, as different trackers are projecting wildly different numbers, with some as low as $130 million to as high as $180 million for the long holiday weekend. And I don't care how much anecdotal evidence I hear, I still have a hard time imagining that Solo is going to make much over $100 million on its opening weekend. Again, you've heard me sing this song before, but I'll sing it again. This is a movie that nobody asked for. Nobody wanted a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford. On top of that, all the director drama. On top of that, all the drama coming out of The Last Jedi and a lot of people being turned off of Star Wars from The Last Jedi and all that kind of stuff. You put all of, not to mention you got Avengers Infinity War and you got Deadpool 2 in theaters at the same time. I'm just having a bit of a difficult time accepting that this thing is going to do much over $100 million, which I think would still be spectacular. I mean, over $100 million opening weekend would still be great. I just can't see it doing much more than that. If it actually does do what these reports are saying and breaks that Memorial Day weekend, gets into the 130, 140, 150, $160 million range, whatever it ends up being, that has got to be considered nothing less of an unmitigated triumph when you consider all the circumstances surrounding this. And again, I cannot emphasize how much. A lot of people have very short memories. When they were first talking about doing a solo movie without Harrison Ford, it was overwhelmingly negative response from most people. And I still think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around wanting to see a Han Solo on screen not being played by Harrison Ford. Look, if these reports end up being true, fantastic. That's great. I'm just saying, don't be surprised at all if Sunday and Monday, the official box office numbers come out and it's closer to 100, 105, something like that. But who knows? If it hits these types of numbers, that's crazy impressive. And that'll do it for today's installment of the Movie News Feed. And now you are all caught up to date on everything going on in the world of movie news. So now let's get over to the main topics today as submitted by you guys. How do you guys submit a topic or question to be on the John Campea Show? It's simple. You just email me at any time at john@thejohncampeashow.com. Put the word topic in the subject line and keep those emails, guys, to 90 words or less, or else I simply can't use them because they wouldn't even fit on the screen. All right, let's go to the first emailed in question today. And the first emailed in question today comes to us from Lucas Kroll, who writes, "Thanks so much for taking my question. Love your show." Thank you so much, Lucas. My question is, Where is the promotion for Ocean's 8? I just found out it comes out in less than 3 weeks, and yet there is little to no promotion for it. All right, thanks a lot for the email, Lucas. And yes, Ocean 8 coming out here pretty soon. I'm curious about the film. I thought the trailers have actually been pretty good. Because, well, you know, I'm a sucker for a heist movie. So I think the trailers will look pretty good. I'm pretty interested in it. I'm looking forward to seeing it. There hasn't been a whole ton of marketing. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, right now is a difficult time to market any movie because, as we've been talking about in this show already, you've got Avengers Infinity War in theater, you got Deadpool 2 in theater, we're about to have Solo open up in theater. You run a risk of putting a lot of money into marketing right now and having that marketing kind of getting drowned out or lost or, you know, shuffled off to the sides or falling through the cracks. Because there are some pretty big major films in theaters and about to hit theaters. On top of that, I think they're realistic about the box office potential of an Ocean's 8. Like, the more money you put into the marketing, the much more money you have to make at the box office in order to overcome that extra marketing budget. So I think the studio's probably made a little bit of a calculated decision. They know they've got an estimate in their heads about how much they think this movie can make, and they want to make sure they keep their spending in check. So it's a two-pronged problem. Number one, you don't want to spend too much money on marketing a film that doesn't have a really high ceiling for how much money it can make at the box office. And number two, you don't want to put a lot of money into marketing that's just going to get drowned out by other bigger forces. Get the word out as good as you can. Utilize inexpensive marketing as much as you can. And to be fair, I've seen a number of trailers. Like on TV, in front of movies, certainly advertisements online. I've seen a number of trailers. It's not like they're hiding this movie. It is being marketed, just not being given a huge marketing push like a $1 billion potential film would, because this is not a $1 billion potential film. This is a $250 million potential film. Like at its best, it's going to make like $250 million at its best. So you don't want to put in too much money into that, or else you've got even more money you got to make up, which they probably won't. All right, let's move on to the next email. And the next email today comes to us from Luke. And Luke writes, "Hi from Australia." Well, hello, Luke, and thank you for listening in Australia. Love your show. Regarding the news about Gyllenhaal possibly joking Spidey, you meant joining Spidey. I'm curious. Now that Marvel has really stepped up their game in the villains department, do you think high caliber actors will start targeting these parts as opposed to the hero roles? Okay, so Luke brings up a really interesting topic here. Because for those of you who didn't hear yesterday, Jake Gyllenhaal, it's been confirmed, is in talks with Marvel to appear as the villain in Spider-Man Homecoming 2 in the role of Mysterio. All right. This does raise an interesting topic. Going back to Vulture, because Marvel, even a Marvel fan like myself, has traditionally been a little bit critical of Marvel in the fact that, hey, their villains are never their strong suit. The villains in the MCU movies are never really the highlights of their films. And that has been by design. Kevin Feige has said in the past that they really use their villains just as tools to propel the story of the heroes. You know, Kevin Feige has said historically, the Marvel MCU films have been about the heroes. And the villains are just there to help the heroes along their hero's journey. So that's fine. I get that. I've always understood that. It's just that, you know, the result is, other than maybe Loki, you've never had like these really great, memorable villains in the MCU. However, that has been changing. Whether you go back to Spider-Man Homecoming and Michael Keaton's Vulture, which was one of the highlights of that movie. I love Vulture in that movie. Whether you're talking about Killmonger, which some people feel like Killmonger is one of, if not the best comic book villain they've ever seen. Not me personally, but he was great. Now you got Thanos, who maybe actually is the greatest villain in any comic book movie ever. And Hela, I mean, traditionally speaking, the formula for these superhero movies is, yeah, the good guys have their nemesis, and the movie builds up to them fighting, and ultimately you know that the hero beats the nemesis. Well, I mean, you bring in Hela and you turn that formula on its ear because Thor can't beat Hela. Hela is tougher and stronger and better than Thor, destroying Mjolnir with one hand. I mean, so they've done a lot of different things lately, and I think, and some of us started to suspect this with Killmonger, but it does kind of look like Kevin Feige's philosophy may have changed over the past couple of years to, no, you know what? We can highlight our heroes and we can have great emphasis on our heroes and still give a lot of attention to our villains and make our villains memorable and important in their films. Because their track record recently, you can no longer say that Marvel doesn't do a good job with their villains. You could say that before. You could very fairly say that before. You can't say that now. Not now that, like, the last 4 villains we've had from them in a row, Vulture, Hela, Killmonger, Thanos, like, they seem to have a completely new approach to their villains at this point. And I think that's just a good thing. Now, what this means for Marvel is that you don't have to do it one way or the other. It means since they've had success just using their villains as a tool to promote the hero, they can do that in a future movie still. But now they know they can very effectively use their villains to overall improve the stories and the narratives altogether. So what this does is it doesn't create a new formula for Marvel. It just opens up the options and possibilities. And I think that's exciting and one of the benefits you get of doing something like that. All right, let's move on now to the final email question of the day. And the final email question today comes to us from Samantha Edwire, who writes, "Hey, John, love watching your show on the daily train commute." Well, thank you so much, Samantha. The topic of bankable Hollywood actors has come up a few times, but usually in the context of male actors. I was just wondering, who do you think the marketable actresses are in the business today? Well, when talking about marketable, there's different terms. Some people think marketable and bankable are the same thing. I kind of see them as different. Because marketable, there's many actresses who are very marketable. Whether you're talking about a Lupita Nyong'o right now, whether you're talking about a Cate Blanchett, whether you're talking about a Jennifer Lawrence, whether you're talking about an Emma Stone or an Emma Watson, whether you're talking about a Meryl Streep, these are all marketable. These are names you could put in your movie that will catch people's attention. Bankable, though, to me is different. See, marketable means you get people's attention. Bankable means that name by itself will get them to plop down the money and come out to the movie. And see, I see those as 2 stages. Marketable, bankable, 2 stages, but completely different things. There are many actresses out there who are absolutely marketable. That you put their name on a poster, people will pay attention. People go, oh, that's interesting. Now that movie has credibility. See, putting an actor who is marketable into a movie brings credibility to the movie. It's like we got this movie and it's got Harrison Ford. Oh, I know Harrison Ford. We got this movie coming out and we got Amy Adams in it. Oh, I know Amy Adams. You know, it gets your attention, it puts the movie on your radar, and it gives to the viewer your movie credibility because you got names in there that are marketable. Bankable is the transition from just knowing that the film's there to saying, oh, because that person's in it, I'm going to plop down my money and go see it. And that is an extremely rare thing now. That used to be what you could do in the 80s. It just really doesn't exist anymore so much. There was a period of time when Will Smith was pretty much it. He was the only guy who was like a bankable star. And Will Smith isn't even, bankable anymore. The only guy who's really bankable right now is probably Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Because, we were just talking yesterday about how his newest movie, Rampage, crossed the $400 million mark. That's not super big blockbuster, but you put any other actor in that movie, that ridiculous notion of a movie, it doesn't make $400 million, it makes less. But you put in Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, it makes $400 million. So I really only see one actor. If I had to guess at who maybe the one actress was that you could make an argument is bankable, the one actor, maybe Dwayne Johnson, the one actress, maybe Scarlett Johansson. Because you put first of all, Scarlett Johansson pops up in these big hits, that's great. But then you put her in a movie like Lucy that had no business making any money, and it makes a bunch of money. Yeah, I would say the one actress who goes beyond marketable to actually bankable, like your forecast for how much money your movie can make actually goes up a bit if you put her in it, much like Dwayne Johnson, I would probably say Scarlett Johansson. I mean, I can't back that up. That's just me theorizing. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Who do you think are not just marketable actresses today, but actually bankable? And by the way, do you think there are other actors besides Dwayne Johnson who are actually bankable? Like putting them in increases your box office take automatically. Let me know what you guys think. Jump down to the comment section and give me your thoughts. All right, guys, with that out of the way, we're all through the official agenda. We only got some live questions to get to right now. Again, guys, I really prefer when you send in questions that are related to the topics we're talking about. Absolutely send in topics about anything you like, but I particularly enjoy it when you send in topics related to the news items of the day. But with that out of the way, let's get to the actual live questions today. We got about 10 minutes left here. And the first live question today comes to us from Jay Bling, who writes, I bet John Krasinski will be in 6 Underground. He's Michael Bay's new muse, and he and Ryan Reynolds seem to have a real-life bromance now. They have a great dynamic. I don't know about that. I don't know about that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't know that Krasinski, with his new increased stock, because look, John Krasinski's stock in Hollywood has risen by about 1,000 times because of A Quiet Place. Not just as a director, but he's certainly going to be a sought-after director now, but also as a leading man, which I've always known he could be. I've just been surprised up to this point that it hasn't happened till now. Okay, so you've got that. I think if anything, Krasinski's probably looking at actual theatrical films. That's what I think John Krasinski is actually going to be looking at, is actual theatrical films right now. So I think your theory, you've got good basis for your theory. You've presented your thing. Hey, look, great close relationship with Michael Bay. He's got a success. The other thing that goes in favor of your theory is that Netflix isn't giving this movie a small budget. Like I said, according to the story, this movie's is going to have a $150 million budget for a Netflix movie. That means they've got the money to spend. They've got the money to spend on a John Krasinski if they want to. I still don't think it's going to happen, but there are certainly good, valid arguments to go towards your theory here that, hey, I'm not going to be shocked if we hear that he's going to be in it for sure. All right. Luke1234 writes, are trailer views an indication of box office performance? No, not really. Not really. I mean, it's certainly not a bad thing. Like if your trailer, you drop a trailer to your movie and it gets like the 5th most views in trailer history, that's certainly not a bad thing. At the same time, you know what trailer held the record at one point for the most views of a trailer? 50 Shades. 50 Shades, the sequel, not even the first one, the sequel. And that one didn't do gangbusters at the box office. So no, it's not necessarily an indicator. It's not necessarily. It's not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily like a prime indicator either. Jonathan C. writes, Kang the Conqueror to go back in time with Avengers in A4. Well, number one, we don't know for sure there's going to be time travel in it. Number two, that movie's already going to be overstuffed as it is. I don't think you bring in another, high premium Marvel villain like Kang the Conqueror in it. So look, anything's possible for sure, but no, I don't think so at all. I would be quite surprised. There are things that I don't think it'll happen, but I won't be surprised if it does. This is something I would actually be quite surprised if they do. Still possible, but I really don't see them doing that. Chris Miner writes, I hate it when fans want a movie to fail. It's sad. It is sad, and I've never understood it. I've never understood that philosophy. Like, it's cool if a movie's coming out that you don't like or aren't looking forward to, but like, even with 50 Shades, I think the 50 Shades movies are garbage. But I'm not celebrating that they're over, because there are people out there who like them. And just because they're movies that I don't like, how does that affect me if they make more and they're putting them out in theater? Other than the fact that my job is to review movies and I have to go see them, unlike you guys. But I never want a movie to fail. I mean, there's no, if you're a rational human being, there's no upside to that. Lender writes, would you like to see a film based on the rise of Marvel Studios? What studio would produce it? What film would it end with? The Avengers? No, I'm not interested in that, to be honest with you. No. As far as what studio would produce it, obviously it would be Disney, if anybody, but I'm not interested in that. Alexander Helmer writes, better villain, Ramsey or Joffrey? You would think it would be impossible to top Joffrey, but I think they topped him with Ramsey Bolton. I really do. I think they topped it with Ramsey. I think Ramsey was the better villain. History Soup writes, 2 unaired Lucifer episodes air on the 28th. Let's pop the ratings. Yeah, we talked about this on the shows yesterday, that Lucifer, I think it's because of all the fan demands and like the fact that people like me are whining and bitching and moaning about it on Twitter constantly. Like, how dare you cancel Lucifer? That they are going to air 2 unaired episodes of Lucifer back to back on the 28th. I think this might be them showcasing Lucifer to try to get another network to pick it up. So fingers crossed that this does well and other networks say, hey, there really is a hunger for these Lucifer shows. Maybe we should pick it up to fill in our Tuesday night time slot or something like that. Here's hoping that that happens. History Soup writes, and we just got a couple minutes left here, guys. Would perfect CGI of long dead actors be ethical? Sure, I don't see the problem with it as long as like the family and the estate of that actor are okay with it, but I don't see the advantage. Yeah, you can put somebody that looks like Philip Seymour Hoffman. Sure, you can create a digital representation of something that looks like Philip Seymour Hoffman, but it's not Philip Seymour Hoffman. It doesn't have his voice, his talent, all the things that make him important. You don't get any of that. So I don't think it's unethical as long as you get the family's permission. I just don't see the advantage of it, to be honest with you. I don't see the upside of it. Just replace the actor. It's a lot easier. It's a lot cheaper. And it makes more sense to me. Santez Henderson writes, do you think a film getting a sequel is contingent on box office or is it reviews? Oh, it's box office. Make no mistake. Sometimes it's hard to judge seeing some movies like Kick-Ass get a sequel, but it's a failure with money. Oh, no, Kick-Ass was not a failure with money. Are you kidding me? Kick-Ass nearly made $100 million on a $30 million. It made more than triple its budget. Kick-Ass was profitable. Kick-Ass made money. See, the main thing that goes into whether a movie gets sequels or not is box office, because it's a business, right? They're looking at things that will make money. However, reviews and audience reaction definitely plays into it a little bit, because let's take a movie like Kick-Ass. Okay, it made money. It was profitable. But still borderline as to whether or not, and it wasn't hugely profitable, right? But the fact that it got such huge critical response and huge audience response made the studio go, hey, this one not only made money, but people seem to really love it. And we're willing to roll the dice that if we make another one, even more people will come out to watch it because of the positive word of mouth. Now, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Like, I don't think, how much did Kick-Ass 2 make at the box office? I'm not sure. I don't think it made much. Like compared to the first one. Kick-Ass 2, made less. Yeah, Kick-Ass 2 only made $60 million. So it made like 1/3 less. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, the primary thing that goes into consideration, again, it's not a 100% rule, but the primary consideration is absolutely the box office. John loves Big Ice. What do you think of famous people that are not actors getting parts in movies like Rihanna in Ocean's 8 with Oscar award-winning actresses? I don't like it. I mean, I don't mind it so much if it's small roles. But here's an example. You know, I've been doing these interviews with Erin Cummings, right? A woman who's been dedicated to acting for almost 20 years. She eats, breathes, sleeps acting all the time. She has trained in her craft and works, and that's all she does is acting, day and night, acting. And there are a million Erin Cummings in Los Angeles. Maybe not all as talented as Erin Cummings, but, you know, women and men who just have dedicated themselves to the craft of acting, blah, 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 blah. Do we give these actors who have dedicated their lives and have far more acting talent than, say, a Rihanna or name any other famous person who's not an actor being given roles in these big movies instead of to these actresses who have earned it and who would ultimately make your movie better because they're better actresses than, say, a Rihanna or some famous, you know, musician or somebody who's famous getting roles in movies. Now, that's not to say that famous people can't become good actors. That's not to say that at all. But yeah, it does frustrate me when I live in Los Angeles and I'm constantly seeing, I know tons of people who are true actors and who are way better at acting than some random famous person being given movie roles, and these actors aren't being given those movie roles. That to me is frustrating. I understand the marketing angle of it. I do. I understand the marketing angle of it. Because like you take a movie like Ocean's 8, you've got big name award-winning actresses, right? So you've got most of your talent covered. So from a marketing point of view, throw in a famous name. that may not be the best actor, but throw in a famous name because we've got these great actresses already leading the charge. Like, I think you've got no less than 3 Academy Award winning actresses in this movie already, right? So I get it, but it still bothers me a little bit, to be honest with you. Let's see. Had a little bit of a jump here. Mike Zambrano writes, and guys, this is the final question I'll be able to take today, but if you have sent in a question that isn't getting answered here on the live show, don't you worry about it. It's going to be included in the next companion video. I'm going to take your questions and answer them in the next companion video, so keep your eyes open for that. So, final question today from Mike Zambrano, who writes, just got done binging The Office for the first time. Oh man, I envy you. What a great show. Thought it ended pretty good, even though I hate it with what they did with Andy. Well, I mean, yeah, I hated what they did with Andy as well. That's the thing that turned me off the show. And, you know, I've said forever, even when Steve Carell left The Office, I thought The Office had enough talent and enough great characters that show still could have succeeded and still could have continued for another 3 or 4 seasons, even without their lead character, Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell. What sunk that show was the idiots over there decided, well, who should we make now the focus point of the show? Clearly, it should have been John Krasinski or Rainn Wilson. It should have been one of those 2 characters should have become the new focus of the show, or made both of them the focus of the show. But instead they went, you know what? That little movie, The Hangover, was a real big hit, and Ed Helms is in The Hangover. Let's make, even though it makes no sense at all in the world, let's make the Ed Helms character the new centerpiece of the show. That's a great idea. Morons. One of the most catastrophically idiotic moves in television history. And the show just went downhill after that. All from that one bad decision. But yes, overall, the show is still magnificent. I love that show, and I'm really glad you had a chance to get caught up on it and learn what it is to love The Office. All right, guys, that will do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for joining me. Hey, listen, guys, do me a favor. If you haven't done so already, if you enjoy my programming, do me a favor, head on over to www.patreon.com/JohnCampea. Get all the information about what it means to be a Patreon supporter, how being a Patreon supporter keeps these shows on the air, and the benefits of being a Patreon supporter. Audio-only versions of the podcast, the Facebook group, the Star Wars show, which I recently announced I was canceling. My Patreon supporters talked me into bringing it back, but only as a Patreon-only show. So if you're into the Star Wars show that I was doing, it's going to be continuing as a Patreon-only show. So maybe you want to check that out too. But anyway, maybe you'll want to become a Patreon supporter too. If you do, that's awesome. You're helping keep the show on the air. And if not, no problem. I'm just grateful you're here being a film fan with us. All right, guys, that will do it for me for today. Thanks a lot for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until open mic a little bit later this afternoon, bye-bye.